Hello, friends. I'm going to tell you about a record I really like. It is not a very well-known album. It's a solo album by a guy who used to be in a band that I think didn't get enough attention back in the day. Or actually, maybe they got some attention back in the day, but nowadays you don't hear much about them except from their fans. They still have a pretty big fan base. They toured after this guy left the band and generated a whole new fan base. And unfortunately, half of them have passed away now, so no more reunions are likely. But this guy went on to do and is still doing really cool music. And actually, when he left the band, I sort of lost interest. By now, maybe you have not guessed that I'm talking about the Stranglers. I've talked about the Stranglers before on here, but I really like the Stranglers. Really like the early stuff. The person I'm talking about is Hugh Cornwell, a guitar player, singer, songwriter, one of the songwriters. And I feel like he was kind of my favorite person in the band when I could tell it was a song that he wrote, as opposed to the other people in the band wrote songs too. And I love those songs as well. But there was something kind of melodramatic about Hugh Cornwell's songs, or perhaps just dramatic. And so it was kind of had this worldly strangeness to them, and an element of mystery and kind of a strange worldly presence of political ideas and things like that. It was very complicated, very intelligent, clever, and I really like his solo things. But his first solo album that he did when the band, I think before he had left the band, he went off and did a solo album with the drummer Robert Williams, who had played with Captain Beefheart, which was a strange combination because Captain Beefheart was definitely not punk rock, and Hugh Cornwell was not really punk rock, but he was sort of lumped into that category because of his band. But Robert Williams and Hugh Cornwell it was a really unusual combination. And I remember when this album came out, I liked Captain Beefheart and I loved Robert Williams' drumming. He is kind of like a slightly skewed version of like a progressive rock drummer, like very complicated kind of, not quite Terry Bozzio, but more like maybe, I don't know, like a Bill Bruford type of drummer. Very, kind of complex drummer who is capable of doing strange time signatures and doing all this really cool stuff. And Hugh Cornwell was kind of like an angry, kind of angry guitar player, singer who had kind of an edge to his persona. So the two of them got together and they did an album called Nosferatu, which the cover image is a picture from the film. It's the Nosferatu down here holding his coffin. Kind of hard to see. It's a very old photograph. But there's the two of them. It's Robert Williams and Hugh Cornwell. And it turns out that combination of Robert Williams and Hugh Cornwell is really interesting. This album is an album that I'll give it to friends, or I'll get them a copy of it or something, or they'll listen to it at my house or something legal, and they will say that is the coolest record, but it's not like anything else that came out at the time. I think this came out in like 1979. Yeah, I think 79. It'll probably say down here somewhere. So this was kind of before it was punk rock was still kind of fresh and new, and the idea of doing such an album, the idea of Hugh Cornwell doing an album like this with different kinds of music on here, different styles, things that were not normally instrumented either, if that makes sense. There's obviously the drums are incredible on here, but then there's also other kinds of arrangements and things like that, other than just a standard guitar, drums, and bass and singing. It's like a really diverse collection of different kinds of songs. It's kind of like Hugh Cornwell's, like the Beatles' White Album of Hugh Cornwell's career. And there's another thing on here that is really interesting. This is the other thing that is interesting about this album. Um, if you're a fan of Devo, and at this time I was a huge fan of Devo, I still am, still love Devo. And at the time, I think my favorite bands, if I had, back then I was picking favorites, I guess, and my favorite bands at the time were the Stranglers and Devo. They were like two of the favorite bands of mine. They were just fantastic music coming out of both of those entities. And I found out on this album that there is a song on here that has Mark Mothersbaugh and his brother Bob. So it's like, wow, all my favorite people, so many of my favorite people getting together on this album. And the song is the song is called Rhythmic Itch, which sounds like a Devo song. And I consider it to be kind of like a lost Devo song. If you're a big Devo fan, you should find this song somehow, because you can consider it to be like a lost Devo song that I'm hipping you to here, because it really sounds like Devo. It's got the vocals and the instrumentation, the sounds, the synthesizer sounds. It's very, very Devo. But then there's a little bit of Hugh Cornwell in there, and Robert Williams. It's a pretty interesting song, and the whole album is interesting. And I don't really know how they all came together. I think I remember reading some kind of story where Devo was recording in the same studio, and they said, "Hey, why don't you come over?" or something like that. Maybe I'm mixing it up with something else, but it's a really fascinating album for the time when it came out. It was a unexpected and unusual album, and I remember just when I heard it, it was like, wow, this is like progressive punk or something. I don't know what it is. It's cool that I don't know what it is. Anyway, check it out if you can. Go search for it, look for it, find it somehow. I recommend it, and especially if you're a Stranglers fan, or if you're a Devo fan, there's something on there. But anyway, thanks for listening, and I will talk to you again real soon.